Joining us today, Stan Verrett, SportsCenter anchor, ESPN anchor for 22 years and counting. He's co-host of Boo-Yah, a celebration of Stuart Scott this year. Our thanks to the presenting sponsors for Boo-Yah: Bristol Myers Squibb and Disney. The platinum sponsor is Hearst, the gold UFC. Stan is co-hosting with Hill Harper. And Stan, thank you for joining us today. We're excited about this.
Great to be with you, John. Thank you for having me.
How excited are you to co-host Boo-Yah and have some fun with Hill and the whole crowd coming up here in December?
I'm really looking forward to it. It's fantastic. It'll be great to be back in New York City. Being on the West Coast, I don't get East as much as I would like to sometimes. So it'll be great to be back on the East Coast. I mean, Hill is a friend. We're both, as you probably know, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity brothers, as was Stuart Scott. And so I'm expecting a great night. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and hopefully we raise a lot of money for the V Foundation and their important work.
Yeah, and it's such a wonderful night to support the V and celebrate Stuart. How did Stuart inspire you?
I was working in local television when Stuart first got to ESPN. And I think one of the things that he did through his presentation was open up an avenue for sportscasters to bring more of themselves to the work. So much of it previous to Stewart's rise at ESPN was just the basics, scores and highlights and a solid but not spectacular presentation. It was, hey, I'm getting the information that I needed, but it wasn't as much fun as Stuart made it. I think he opened up the avenue for creative expression for so many different sportscasters, myself included. He brought pop culture references to it. He brought humor to it. He brought some of his personal experiences to it. He did the spoken word highlights from time to time that were just incredibly creative. So he just opened up avenues for lots of sportscasters to bring more creativity to their presentations.
And he's really setting a trend now in the area of cancer research, the Stuart Scott Memorial Cancer Research Fund, addressing racial disparities in cancer outcomes, supporting general cancer research led by underrepresented groups, making a difference in areas of cancer research that have never been made before. In your mind, what impact is his fund having now in the future, and how does it all tie to his legacy?
Well, I think the important thing is for us to understand, or I should say for researchers to understand how cancer works, how it affects the human body, how to stop it in its tracks. And particularly when you look at the research into how it disproportionately affects people of color, particularly Black people, maybe we learn some key facts that help in the overall fight against cancer, because this is not a disease that discriminates. The effects may be more prevalent in communities of color, but the disease itself does not discriminate. I don't think there's a family in America, maybe in the world, that hasn't been touched by cancer at some point. And so it's something that affects all of us. The realities of it, because of socioeconomic factors, are probably, or I guess the research indicates that they are more profound in communities of color. But the disease itself affects everybody. And so if there are specific things that we can learn about how cancer affects us, about how to possibly cure it at some time in the future from the research dedicated to how it affects communities of color, then I think everybody wins in the long haul.
And as you said, cancer touches us all. Because of that, what does it mean to you to support the V Foundation?
I don't know that there is a bigger challenge, ongoing challenge for humanity than trying to cure cancer. I would put climate change right up there with it, but trying to cure cancer is something that a cure for cancer could have global effects. It could change human existence. And I can't think of a more worthy goal than that. I mean, this is a disease that has wreaked havoc on so many people and so many families. And taken so many lives earlier than they should have gone. And I think it's a noble cause. I think it's a worthwhile cause. And it's one of the things that really makes me proud to be associated with it.
And the V Foundation is so much a part of ESPN and its commitment to giving back. You've had a fantastic career so far. You joined ESPN in 2000. What was that moment like? Your first time anchoring at ESPN and the realization that you've hit the point that every sportscaster tries to get to, being an anchor for ESPN.
It was always my dream from the moment I realized I was never going to play in the NFL, which I came very early. When I stepped on a football field at 15 and I saw what real talent looked like, I said, okay, this is not going to work out. So how can I be around football? How can I be around sports and utilize the talents and the skills that I do have? And so becoming a sportscaster became my dream at that point. And if you're a sportscaster, as you said, ESPN is a place where you go to realize that dream in all of its magnificence. And so that was my career goal. And September of 2000, when I did that first show, my overarching thought when I got done with that first show was, well, I got to come back and do this again tomorrow, because in local sports, you're on for 3 minutes and then that's your contribution to the newscast. My first day, I was on for 3 hours on ESPN News solo. And I got done. I said, wow, man, I don't even think my mom wants to hear me talk that much. And I got to come back and do this again tomorrow. And so, but it was a thrill. It was, one of the great days of my career when I felt like, okay, I've gotten to the place where I've always wanted to be, but now I got to get to work. And I didn't just want to be there. I wanted to be there and be the best that I could be.
And you've definitely done that in your 22 plus years at ESPN.
Thank you.
Also a pioneer too, in that you started SC in LA. What was that like in 2009 to be able to start a whole new version of SportsCenter, opposite coast? You have the LA feel, and I think that comes across in the broadcast too. But to start that, and what was the goal of it at first? What is it today in terms of differentiating it maybe from the other shows on ESPN?
Well, I wasn't privy to the decision-making process on how it started, but I can give you my best guess.
Sounds good.
One reason I think it was a quality of life decision for a lot of people. I mean, it's 3 hours earlier, and when you do a nightly recap highlight show, and you're leaving the studio at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning on the East Coast, particularly in the winter where it's snowing, you got to go shovel your driveway out. I mean, it's a different quality of life than it is here when you're leaving at 11 p.m. or midnight, and the weather is not really a factor most of the time. So it's a great thing. I mean, I love being out here. I think one of the other factors was that there is this perception, real or imagined, that ESPN has an East Coast bias, which I think at times, people can make a case, because if you're around going to the dry cleaners, going to restaurants, doing your daily route, and everybody's talking about the Red Sox and Yankees, it can feel like the Red Sox and Yankees is the biggest thing for the entire country, when out here, Giants Dodgers is a bigger thing than Red Sox Yankees. And they're just as concerned with the Lakers, or just as concerned with the Warriors as they are with the Celtics or the Knicks or the Bucks or any other team. So I think it sort of gave ESPN more of a competitive response. Fox has a large presence on the West Coast, and so I think it was important that we have one as well. And that's something we've always kept in mind. And I think one of the great things about working out here is that it's a much smaller staff, a much smaller studio, and so it feels like the world's greatest local station, like a local station with unlimited resources that ESPN offers, where we know everybody's name who works here, and so it has all of the might and the power of ESPN, but just in a smaller package, and it's fantastic.
So that's interesting. Kind of, in some ways, might take you back to the days of anchoring in the local markets, and kind of how your career began and that feel.
Yeah. Of course, there's a different standard. I mean, we're ESPN, and people expect us to know everything about everything when it comes to sports. And so, we take that responsibility seriously. But in terms of the intimacy of the feel of coming to work every day and interacting with people, it does have, a local market feel to it.
Do you have a favorite SportsCenter moment?
It wasn't directly SportsCenter. It was a town hall that we did in 2016 with President Obama at North Carolina A&T University. I got a call. I was in New Orleans. I'm a big Saints fan from New Orleans. So I was in New Orleans for a game, and I got a call from an ESPN executive at the time who said, "Hey, we're doing this this town hall meeting with the president at North Carolina A&T University, and we'd like for you to host it." And so I said, yeah. It was early in the morning, and I'd gone to the game before and hung out with my buddies after the game because the Saints won. And so,
Yeah.
I was kind of foggy. And so I said, hey, let me call you back later when I get up. But yeah, I'm in. I'll get more details later. So I'm walking through the airport, getting ready to fly back to LA. And I call him back, and we start talking. And he said, yeah. He said, just so you know, the president was given a list of different people who could host this, and he picked your name from the list. And I said, oh, wow, that's a big honor. And I'm still thinking that it's the president of North Carolina A&T. And so I say, well, I'm not really sure who's the president of North Carolina A&T because I'd like to thank him. He said, no, it's not the president of North Carolina A&T. It's the president of the United States, Barack Obama. I'm like, oh, my goodness. And I remember exactly where I was in the airport walking to my gate because I just stopped and froze. And I said, my goodness, this is going to be a bigger undertaking than I thought, But it was a highlight of my career. I mean, you never think as a sportscaster that you're going to wind up interviewing the president. Maybe the president of the NCAA or the commissioner of the NFL or commissioner of Major League Baseball, but never the president of the United States. And so that has been the highlight of my career. My mom was there. My now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she was there. My sister was there, so it was a great thing. I mean, I have the pictures of my mom with President Obama, and they were among my most treasured possessions.
Do you still talk to him today? You guys, you keep in touch? It's pretty amazing, right? He requested you. He wanted you to interview him, and obviously he's a great sports fan, and he always had fun with the March Madness brackets. You still keep in touch with him today?
No, we talked about, at the end, we talked about playing golf. At some point, because he's a big golfer as I am, but hasn't happened yet. I'm going to get Mike Wilbon on the case. I heard they play a lot together, so we'll make it happen at some point.
Perfect. And your golf game's in good shape. You said you're going to be hitting the range later today.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So where are you shooting today? Yeah.
I hate to make people jealous in November in Los Angeles talking about going to the driving range, but that's where I'm headed after the podcast. I got back down to single digits. I'm back to a 9 handicap. I've been floating upwards to about 12, and I'm a single-digit player when I'm playing my best. So now that I feel the swing that's working for me right now, I want to lock it in so I can stay there. I got buddies to beat.
Exactly. I wish I was in the single digits for a handicap. So that's great. What's the strength of your game? Is it off the tee, short game?
Harvey Penick, who was the legendary coach at the University of Texas, who taught Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite, he said, a great putter is a match for anyone. A bad putter is a match for no one, and the trees are full of long drivers. So I've always focused on putting. Tiger Woods said the same thing. He learned the game from inside out. Start at the green, work your way back. And so I've always focused on putting. And I can't tell you, I come across a lot of former professional athletes who are golfers who I play with, guys who have all their time on their hands, and they play a lot of golf. And so I get to meet a lot of them through the work. And so they find out I play golf, so we go out and play golf. I can't tell you how many of them bomb it past me off the tee, but I still beat them and putt. So putting's always been a focus, and then chipping out from there, and then pitching from there, then irons from there, and then driver from there. Because you can hit a 275-yard drive, but the hole's not over. When you put the ball in the hole's over, and nothing else bad can happen. So I've always focused there. So putting.
That's key, right? 100 yards in is where all the scoring happens, and especially on the putt.
One other point. I've never seen a guy hit a drive, no matter how long it was, in a golf tournament, and they hand him a trophy afterwards. They give him the trophy after the putt goes in the hole.
And we all remember Tiger at his peak and all those clutch long putts that he made. And
Yeah.
I know he invented in many ways the power of the game, but to your point, it's the short game. It's
Yes.
sinking those putts. That's the key.
Yep.
John Saunders, founding member of the V Foundation Board of Directors, a tireless supporter of cancer research. He passed at the age of 61, and in 2016, you assumed his role as studio host for college football. What did you learn from John? What did it mean to you to take on that role and host college football for ESPN and ABC?
The day he died, I was driving with, again, my now wife, and I had just seen John a few days before at the NABJ convention, the National Association of Black Journalists, and we stopped him. We had a talk, and he asked me how everything was going, and as he always did when we connected, and she says, "Wow, John Saunders died," and I said, "John Saunders who?" She's like, "The sportscaster." I said, "No, he didn't. I just saw him a few days ago." I'm like, "That's some kind of mistake or something." And she said, "No, it's right here. He died." I said, "No way." And I actually pulled over because I said, this can't be right. And sure enough, it was. And it was terrible. He was one of the people that I looked up to. As we said earlier, I'm fortunate to have been at ESPN for 22 years. When I looked at the kind of career that I wanted to have, I've always believed in that the approach of begin with the end in mind and then work back from there. And so when I started thinking about the kind of career I wanted to have, one of the things that was really important to me was longevity, consistency, being the kind of personality that people could create a relationship with that would last over years, over decades. And that's what John did. He was he was so good for so long, and that was my aspiration. And he was always there with a kind word. He was always there with some advice. He was always there, anytime, I needed to talk about anything. And so it was a real loss. It was a real loss. And when I got the call, it was just 2 weeks before the season, when he passed away. I was excited and honored that ESPN chose me to step into that position. I was also really, really concerned about living up to the standard that he had set for so long. And I gave it my absolute best for that year. I mean, it didn't work out over the long haul because, I have to be here in Los Angeles for SportsCenter. And it was tough because that show is centralized in Bristol. But it was a challenge to try to live up to the standard that he had set. And, his place in the history of our profession, his place in the history of our company is secure because of the contributions that he made over such a long period of time.
And by all accounts, a wonderful human being.
Fantastic.
Great person.
Fantastic. As I said, I mean, when he passed away, he had segued into a position where he was not only working on air, but he was also an in-house sort of mentor, a collaborator for younger sportscasters in the business who just kind of needed to understand how it all worked. And that was a role that he had taken on because he was concerned about helping others. And it said a lot about who he was as a person.
Speaking of that, the younger sportscasters, the next generation, what advice do you have for these young sportscasters? And to your point, it's a complex business.
Yeah.
It's more than just reading the highlights well and coming off well on air or being a good interviewer. There's a lot of different elements to it. What advice do you have for young sportscasters just starting out?
Well, I have an army of mentees out there who are working at various levels across the country. Some who've risen up to national networks now, and some who are just starting out. And I try to tell them the most important thing is to be able to communicate effectively via the written word and the spoken word. It doesn't matter whether it's 2 tin cans and a string or it's the most complex internet network. It's still going to come down to your ability to take information, digest it, and figure out the best way to communicate it to your audience in a way that they can easily digest it. And it's much more important in broadcasting to do that than it is in print. If you're reading something, you can read it, not get it, and then go back and read it again. You don't really get that opportunity in broadcasting. People watch, and they have to be able to get it as you tell it to them. And so, the other thing I try to remind broadcasters is that people watch television, they watch broadcasts as individuals. Even if they're in a group, it's still an individual experience. Like 10 people could be watching the same television, watching the same game or the same broadcast on the same television, but they're each experiencing that individually. So I try not to talk to people when I advise young sportscasters, not to talk to people as a group, but to imagine that you're talking to 2 million people one at a time. So you're talking to 2 million people individually, because I think there's a subconscious connection there when someone feels like you're talking to them and not to a group. And so it's something that can be, we think about how large the audience is, and we want to say, hey, good evening, America. You're not talking to America. You're talking to each American individually, and collectively they make up America. But that's not how they experience it. So I think that's a very subtle thing, but I think it registers with viewers.
Right. Yeah. In many ways, it is. It's a one-to-one medium.
Yep.
And with sports too, you're doing Patriots, Chargers highlights. You're appealing to many different audiences there, and fandoms and the whole thing.
Yeah, especially with our show, because our show's on late at night or early in the morning, depending on when people watch it, because it re-airs. So chances are there are a lot of people who may be watching our show in bed. There are some people who may be watching our show while they're brushing their teeth in the morning, or they're driving to work and listening to it on a device. And so those are very intimate spaces. Those are spaces where if people feel like we're talking directly to them, then maybe they stick around for a little while longer.
Yeah. You talk a lot about the impact of going to St. Augustine High School in New Orleans, and how the people educating you were invested in your success. How did that impact your life?
It's a wonderful institution. It's a transformative experience for the young men who are privileged enough to attend St. Augustine. It's a very unique school. It's an all-black, all-boys Catholic school in New Orleans. And alums and people connected to the school like to say that if there were a St. Augustine in every city in America, it would change Black America, and in turn, it would change America. And the Josephite priests who run the school have a very serious dedication to their mission to uplift the African American community. It's a part of their stated mission as an order, and they have been committed to that at St. Augustine since 1951. It's a really special place. I mean, I was transformed from a boy into a man during my 5 years there, and I watched the transformation of other young men with me, and we have an eternal bond that will never be broken. We take tremendous pride in the school and all of its activities. There are very few of us who aren't still connected to the school, even as we get older. We recently played, the football team played in the Nike Kickoff Classic in Portland in September. And I said, hey, St. Aug's on the West Coast. I got to go to the game. So flew up to Portland. A bunch of classmates were there, and got a chance to connect with them, watch the team. We lost, but it was still a good kickoff to the season, a good test to start the season, because we're in the playoffs now, back home in New Orleans. So, it's a really special place academically, athletically. Our marching band is world renowned, but more so than anything else, I think just the feeling of belonging and the feeling of benefiting and contributing to the school's rich legacy is something that just really sticks with you.
And it's in a lot of ways a team and a family that is always there.
Absolutely. It's like Leonard Fournette is a running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a St. Aug graduate, and although, the Buccaneers are a division rival for the Saints, I mean, we all still have to root for him individually, even as we root against the team. You know what I mean? Because those bonds are that strong. So it's a great place. It was really, really, has been really, really meaningful in my life.
And I know you are a Saints fan. The division's up for grabs, right? I mean, it could be anyone's division this year, right?
Oh boy, 3-7. It's hard to come back from 3-7, but I'm going to hold out hope. They've had a ton of injuries
Never know.
that have really
Yeah.
affected things. New head coach, Jameis Winston was initially the starting quarterback. He got hurt early. I mean, it's Michael Thomas has barely played. Jarvis Landry's barely played. So there's been a lot that has gone wrong. I mean, the Bucs are at 5-5. They're in the driver's seat right now, in the division. But still, at 3-7, only 2 games back. So I'm holding out hope, but they're gonna have to make a real turnaround if they're gonna do it.
Right. Yeah. And finish strong. But you're right. Hey, 5-5 is first place. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I like your attitude, John.
Well, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so I have to stay positive. I mean, it's and I love my Bills more than anything. But there's the ups and downs of being a Bills fan. So
what a game
right?
against the Vikings. That was an incredible game. Game of the year so far.
Game of the year. It really was. A lot of fans are talking about 13 seconds and then that game yesterday. And, it makes us all stronger, right? Isn't that the beauty of sports? It makes us stronger. Final question. We always like to ask people this. What does victory over cancer mean to you? That's our vision at the V Foundation, victory over cancer, obviously fits with Jim and his legacy and his bold nature.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to you, victory over cancer?
I think it's a transformation of humanity. I mean, I don't know that there's been any disease that has affected more people, more families, more communities than cancer has. And this is a gargantuan task, obviously, because of the ongoing research over years and decades and still not being able to pin down what it takes to find a cure. But every day, every hour, every minute of continuing research gets all of us closer to that answer, to that victory. And I can't think of any other fight, any other undertaking, maybe with a notable exception of climate change, that has as far-reaching an effect on people all over the planet. And so, it's my hope, I think, along with everybody else who's been touched by cancer, and that's all of us, that we'll keep working and eventually find a cure. And the V Foundation is a big part of that effort. I mean, if you think about Jim Valvano's speech and the reach that has there been any bigger moment that has created awareness for this fight against cancer? I'd say it's probably the biggest one, to get people to understand the real human nature of this. I mean, it's easy to think about, you think about cancer research as guys in the lab with beakers and taking skin grafts and all the research and everything. But Jim Valvano put a human face on this struggle. He bravely spoke at a time when he knew that cancer would take his life, that he wanted this fight to continue because it wasn't about him. It was about everybody who would come after him who could potentially be saved by a cure. And I think his humanity, his selflessness, his passion in that moment really, really struck a chord. And I helped to put the V Foundation in the position that it's in right now. And that's why every year, when we see it, it's a reminder that, this fight is ongoing and it's important. It can change the course of humanity. And I can't think of a more worthwhile or bigger goal than that.
Yeah, and in so many ways, it's such a timeless speech. Almost 30 years old, and it can resonate with anyone at any age today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Stan, we can't thank you enough. We really appreciate you taking the time today. Appreciate your support of the V Foundation. Boo-Yah will be a great event in New York coming up in December. Good luck to your Saints. And thank you again. We appreciate it.
And good luck to your Bills. They don't need as much, but